Welcome to MedSurg Moments, the AMSN podcast.
This podcast is an engaging look at the lives of and surrounding medical surgical nurses.
We're proud MedSurg nurses just like you, sharing our stories, insights, and experiences to support you in your nursing journey.
Hello there. Today's episode is part 3 of our 3-part series on the AMSN DEI initiative.
In 2020, the Academy of Medical Surgical Nurses recognized that urgent change was needed to address the issues of racism and inequity that exist in nursing in America's healthcare system.
In response, AMSN created and launched a sweeping initiative in providing education and awareness to nurses and healthcare professionals across the industry.
AMSN's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusiveness initiative formally launched in March 2021 with a goal to open conversations and drive change.
In part 3, we will focus on how AMSN has been transformed in the 2 years since the pledge and what the future holds for AMSN's DEI initiative. With us is Terri Hinkley. Terri has served as the CEO of AMSN and MSNCB since 2017. She has 10 years of association leadership experience, coupled with over 32 years in acute care nursing in the healthcare setting. Terri, it's truly our pleasure to welcome you back to MedSurg Moments.
It's my pleasure to be here, Laura. It's been a while since I've joined you. I'm quite excited to speak with you and Parker tonight.
Woo-hoo. I don't think I've seen Terri in person since 2019, Chicago.
I know. And I missed you in San Antonio.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think our listeners know that I'm attending Duke University for the Adult Gero Acute Care NP program. So I was away that weekend completing some competencies, but make arrangements to attend AMSN convention next year. It's amazing. So let's hop right in. Terri, could you tell us what prompted AMSN to take action in regard to DEI?
Absolutely. I think that for AMSN, like most of the world, quite honestly, we were stunned and shocked with the murder of George Floyd. And while AMSN had been having conversations for quite a while and regularly on how do we make sure that our staff, board, volunteers represent nurses and the patients that we care for, it really was an eye-opening experience for us where we just felt that something needed to be done and needed to be done quickly, because what we were seeing was horrifying and awful. And it was really a call to action for all of us.
It certainly was. I remember very, very well being in nursing and watching all that unfold. So I heard the initiative all began with a pledge. How did that come about?
So as I watched and listened and read about the George Floyd murder, all I kept thinking was, I felt like I had to do something. What could I do and what would that look like? And had I done enough? I really do consider myself to be an ally, and I have family members of color, and I certainly have family members and very close friends with different sexual orientations, gender identities. And I just felt that maybe I needed to do something a little more explicit. So I reached out to our presidents at the time, Robin Hurdle for AMSN and Ann Fokker for MSNCB. And I told them that I really felt compelled in my CEO corner, which is just something that I write on a monthly basis for our newsletter, that I was really feeling compelled to sort of put a pledge that I was going to hold myself accountable to, and that members and certificates could also hold me accountable to show that I was really committed to driving change in this area. They loved the idea. They also wanted to do their own pledges. And so it started with the 3 of us, and then it just sort of snowballed from there. Both boards of directors participated. We put a pledge page up on the website. It's still there if you're interested. And we had members, certificates, and others also joining us in a pledge to try and do their part, and what action specifically that they would take to try and do their part to promote a work environment, in AMSN's case, an organization that really embraced diversity, equity, and inclusion was going to make it a priority.
I think like a buzzword I've heard around these conversations are buy-in. how do you get members of your organization to buy in, talking about diversity and equity and inclusion? How did you build consensus behind the DEI initiative, especially when some people feel like there is no problem or there is no racial problem or discrimination being brought against people in the LGBTQ community?
First of all, what we were witnessing was so horrific. I think that it was very easy to build consensus that something had to be done and something needed to change. But then we also did a survey and we reached out to members and we asked them what their experiences were. Had they ever experienced this themselves? Have they ever witnessed it? Have they ever found themselves to be in an uncomfortable situation? What did they need from us? Did they feel that there was a role for AMSN to play? And the results of that survey were outstanding in terms of many hadn't experienced any sort of discrimination firsthand, but many had witnessed it, and they were looking for education and they were looking for support, and they felt unequivocally that there was a role for AMSN to play in taking leadership and making resources available to members in this area. And that was all the evidence that we needed and allowed us to build quick consensus and move forward from that point.
The modules are great. They really show just how easy it is to not recognize racism and discrimination out in the open like that. I was really moved by a lot of the stories, and it brought me back to a lot of past experiences where I didn't even realize that there was some microaggression or there was some underlying things that were behind the scenes that I didn't pick up on when I witnessed it. So it really caused me to do a lot of reflecting on what kinds of things I had overlooked and when I chose not to speak up, and how I want to hold myself accountable to speaking up going forward. I'm a lot more aware. So the modules are great. Can you tell us how you decided on the approach for DEI when you started with the initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. So interestingly, and I think you unintentionally, but you sort of touched on it, Parker, we decided that we were going to take the approach that, in our opinion, most people do not set out to be discriminatory in any way, shape, or form. And that through education, we could build competency related to understanding language, understanding definitions. We had a lot of work to do, even in understanding the language being used in the DEI space. And I'll give you some examples. Cisgender, microaggressions, implicit bias. Those were all definitions, terms, concepts that most of us, I would hazard a guess, might have had some level of familiarity with. Some we wouldn't have known at all. And we felt that by starting with a focus of education, understanding, and competency, like we do with any other topic that we're trying to educate members on, that it was a safe space, that there were no recriminations, that we were inviting people to join us on a journey to understand better and to be better as a result of gaining knowledge and skills in dealing with those situations.
I really appreciated those definitions in the beginning because you hear them, they're thrown around, they're out on social media, they're in conversations that we have with our families and our friends and our colleagues. But sometimes there's a lack of understanding of what it really means. You can throw a word out there, but not really understand what it means. And taking those modules really took that down to the basic level. It was great. I have a child that identifies as non-binary. So I'm on a personal journey to understand how to change my language around her. So this has helped. This has helped me to connect with her on a different level. And I'm confident that it's going to help me with my colleagues and my patients going forward.
Yeah. And think of how you've been able to approach conversations differently, how you've been able to approach situations differently. And that really ultimately was our goal, was to arm people with the information and the tools that they needed to be able to approach situations, patients, colleagues differently. Parker, you mentioned the stories that you found really insightful and helpful in the modules. And I just want to make the point that every single one of those stories is an actual true story that happened to someone that shared those stories with us for the purpose of the educational modules. So those are stories that members, subject matter experts, and others affiliated with AMSN personally experienced. And we thought that that was also a really powerful tool. We know the impact of storytelling. Storytelling brings things to life for us as individuals. And I'm glad that those resonated with you, because that was what we were intending. We were intending to try and bring this back to, oh, I could see how that happened. I could see how that person reacted. I would have reacted this way. And now I have a potential solution to that. So I'm really glad to hear that they resonated with you.
Yeah. And a lot of our culture has changed. I mean, I've been a nurse for 15 years, and some actions that were overlooked early on in my career are now not acceptable. There's more of a culture of calling things out and bringing attention to our actions. None of us is immune from, I don't want to use the word ignorant, but not really understanding how our words come across. But until somebody tells you that that's not appropriate or that's offensive to somebody, you could go on continuing to act that way. So I love the fact that we are changing our culture and that we're making it easier for people to speak up.
Oh, 100%. There's more power in allyship than I think any of us recognized, even when we started on this journey. The individual being discriminated against most certainly has the ability, and I hope the tools, to be able to respond and react. But it truly is the community coming together to support them that I think is the most powerful. It's that collectively, we're not going to continue to allow those sorts of discriminatory things to continue to happen.
Exactly. It's all of us. It takes all of us to participate, to step up and make it happen.
Yeah, Laura, I definitely appreciate you kind of closing the loop on, oh, I'm getting this information from AMSN. I can apply it in clinical practice and in my personal life. And I really think that's a valuable tool, and also shows the power of education, that these things aren't just applicable on screen, that you can actually use them in your daily life. So thank you for sharing your personal story with us.
My child and I have been through a lot the last couple of years as they started to speak to me, and she gives me a lot of grace, or they give me a lot of grace when I slip up and when I don't use the appropriate pronouns, or when I make statements that she finds offensive. She gives me a lot of grace because I am her mother, but they're definitely speaking up when I do make that mistakes or that error. So I feel better, and I'm getting better about using the right pronouns with her. And it's really helped better our relationship.
Laura, it's so funny that you say that, because I also had a family member identify as non-binary, and another family member reach out to me so concerned that they were going to make a mistake and so worried that they were going to misgender our other family member, and struggling with getting comfortable with they, them pronouns.
It's hard. It's really hard.
It is incredibly hard, because we've spent a lifetime with singular pronouns, binary pronouns, and now trying to get used to using they, them when referring to an individual is incredibly hard. And I used almost the exact same language that you did. I said, allow yourself the grace to learn and to do your very best. And I'm confident that you'll be forgiven if you do slip up. And the other piece of advice that I provided was to practice. And I do that all the time now. I practice not assigning she, her, he, him pronouns to people that I've not been introduced to or met. And I try and refer to them as they, them until I have the opportunity to learn from the individual what their pronouns are and what they prefer. And practicing has made a big, big difference. But I think that before assuming that it's done with ill intent, we have to extend some grace, and only when behavior doesn't change, or despite gentle correction, do individuals continue with a behavior, then can we see it as being an unwillingness, perhaps, to change behavior.
Absolutely. Yes. You can have some grace at the beginning. Let me tell you a few times how I'd like to be addressed. And at some point you can make a good faith effort to make those changes. But if you choose not to, that says a whole lot more about that person. than it does about the misgendered individual.
Right.
Terri, now that we're talking about some of the modules from DE&I and such, could you tell us the major components of the DEI initiative?
So we wanted to take a two-pronged approach to our work with DEI, which meant that it was going to be a significant undertaking, but it was one that we thought was really important. First and foremost, we wanted to educate ourselves and members about DEI issues, provide them with the tools and resources that they needed to be able to embed this in their practice when they're caring for patients, when they're working with colleagues. So you also would have noticed in the modules that each module focuses not only on patient care issues, but also workplace issues. So making sure that we are trying to provide a healthy work environment for all nurses and healthcare professionals, and not allowing discriminatory behaviors against our colleagues, but also in terms of caring for our patients and being sensitive to the considerations of care, whether it be cultural, whether it be related to people with disabilities, whether it be related to sexual identity, gender identity, race, etc. But we also wanted to look at ourselves as an organization. So we took a look at our policies and our procedures, our calls for volunteers, our marketing materials, everything that we do as AMSN. And are we excluding individuals and groups from participating or having the benefits of membership, of certification, etc., scholarship and awards, because we have unintentionally excluded individuals or groups of people, and really looking to make sure that we're making our education accessible, that we are doing as much as we can to invite everyone to participate actively and to the extent that they would like to within the organization. So we approached it from both sides, which was, like I said, a big undertaking, but we just felt that without doing both, any action would be incomplete.
Well, the results are great. The modules that are out there right now were very helpful. So
I'm so glad to hear that, Laura. Thank you.
Yes. No, I learned a lot. Even I felt like I was an educated person on this subject, as I really tried to go out there and see the resources that are available. But I took away a lot from the modules on the AMSN. So I appreciated having taken the time to do that. And I also took the pledge. I took the pledge myself. So looking at the initiative, Terri, what aspect of it makes you the most proud? What makes you the most hopeful going forward?
I'm going to say I think that the educational modules make me the most proud because I think we were really fast to put resources into developing them and trying to get them launched as quickly as possible. I think we were ahead of a lot of organizations in doing that. And I'm very, very proud of the board and the staff for recognizing what was needed and putting the resources and the time and effort into doing them. And I also love that we're focusing on caring for patients, but also recognizing that there's some work to do in terms of the workplace and that we tackled both of those. So it's almost two courses rolled into one, if you will, because there's the practice environment side of things, and then there's the patient care side of things. And I think what makes me the most hopeful, to be honest, is the reaction to it. The fact that it's resonating with people, the fact that it's educating members, that they're learning. There's learning in every module, that individuals that have participated, I know they're not all released yet. Only the first module is available. And that's because we're putting the final module together. So we do anticipate the full program being rolled out around the end of the year or very early next year. But anyone that's had the opportunity to test them or to engage with them, despite our own level of competency related to this topic, we can all learn something. And we all are learning something, for which I'm really grateful. But I think the response is what I'm most hopeful with. Parker, you raised a really good point that not everyone sees that there's a problem, and I certainly can respect their position. I think there's certainly ample evidence that there is a problem, and we're progressing from that perspective. But we've had overwhelming support for the work that we're doing in this area. And I'm very, very proud of that and very hopeful that that means that we'll be able to engage people in that. And I hope that that's in part because we took the approach, like we already discussed, that we could all benefit from learning and building confidence and competence in this area rather than from a, you shouldn't do this. It's not punitive. It's a learning opportunity.
I also feel like it does a little bit to empower people to speak up. When someone says that there's not a problem, if there's someone there to speak up when they do make a derogatory comment or a microaggression, if somebody's there to point it out to them, you can't say that there's not a problem if there's somebody in front of them saying what you just said is offensive in some way, shape, or form. But it empowers people to speak up. And I think that's going to be where we can make a change for ourselves and also for people that really don't see that there's a problem.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's really, really well stated, Laura.
I'm definitely on board with helping people make the commitment to change. Where do you see AMSN in terms of DEI, say, this time next year? I can say from my personal experiences, like disability advocacy, LGBTQ advocacy, advocating for people of color and stuff, it's very limited information that we get in nursing schools. Our textbook may cover like a couple of pages or so, but then there's really nothing actionable for nursing students to do. So could you talk about that as well?
Oh gosh, absolutely. So in terms of where do I think we will be this time next year related to our DEI journey, I think we'll still be progressing. I think that this is going to be an ongoing initiative and we're trying to embed it in all aspects of the organization. I'll give you an example. Most recently, we were working on our PRISM rubric. So the rubric that the committee members use to evaluate PRISM applications. And the committee, which was diverse as well, because we certainly aim to bring diversity into every committee that does work on behalf of AMSN and its membership. When it was done, we actually passed it on to our DEI educational committee and we asked them to look at it and identify any opportunities that we had missed to be sure to be inclusive and equitable and consider those in the rubric and in the scoring of these units. And they came back with some of the most outstanding feedback that we hadn't considered and will be embedding into the rubric. So I think that you will see that in a year from now, we will have much more inclusive and equitable programs. I think that you will see a greater diversity in all of our committees, boards, and volunteer units. I think that you will see continued work in this area, continued statements if there's something that we feel that we need to speak out against or for. I think that you'll see greater competency in members and volunteers and board members in speaking about topics like this. And I hope even greater leadership within the industry, quite frankly, because I think that we've done such a great job with this. To answer your second question about doing a better job with this in nursing school, I think that is starting. I think that it might be a little slower out of the gate, perhaps, Parker, just by virtue of how long curriculum changes take to actually embed it into the classes and figuring out what those competencies are going to look like according to the AACN competencies. They're certainly in there. If you look at the competencies now that the AACN has put out, they've really done a great job in calling out where diversity, equity, and inclusion should be built into those curricula. So I think you're actually going to start to see that trickle behind in the classroom. I hope that you'll see that reflected as well in the faculty. I hope that you'll also see that reflected in the clinical opportunities that nursing students have in the sim labs. I think the simulation labs provide a great opportunity to be embedding DEI topics as learning opportunities. And I hope that we'll see within the next year to 18 months, we'll start to see those actually embedded in the programs.
That's really encouraging to know that change is coming down to the nursing curriculum because it is much needed. We're seeing more and more diverse cohorts within nursing schools, so we definitely need to be keeping up with that.
Absolutely.
What other guidance did AMSN receive with creating the DEI initiative?
Oh, that's such a great question, Parker. And I really would be remiss if I didn't say that we worked really closely with a consultant. We didn't feel that we had the necessary expertise to tackle this on our own. So we brought in Dr. Susan Swayze, who has been doing DEI work, probably for the best part of 20 years, I think. And she helped us really navigate how we were going to approach this. She helped us navigate how to handle change. She helped us with the DEI modules. She was really invaluable. And she challenged us to think differently and deeply about ourselves and how we could do better and be better for our members and certificates and customers. So working with the consultant, I think, just amplified the success that we've been able to have.
Very cool. I think that it's great for our listeners to know that even large organizations such as AMSN need help with identifying a lot of the issues that come with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Terri, could you tell us where we can find all of these wonderful resources?
Yeah, so all of the resources are on the website. The free educational module for the DEI you can find in our online library, and you can get to it from the learning and development section of our website. The pledge is on our website. Certainly encourage everyone who might be inspired to join us in that. All of the resources will be available on the website for you.
Terri, it's truly been a pleasure having you on this important episode of MedSurg Moments. Thank you for sharing your time and expertise with us.
It is always such a pleasure to join you and be an honorary co-host. It's one of my favorite parts of the job. Laura, this was our first podcast together. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. I'm just so thrilled with the work that you're all doing. So thank you so much.
It's great speaking with you.
Thank you, Terri. We look forward to connecting with you on the next episode of MedSurg Moments, the AMSN podcast. In the meantime, we want to hear from you. Send us your questions, topic ideas, and feedback via our official MedSurg Moments email address, amsnpod@amsn.org. That's amsnpod@amsn.org. I'd also like to remind you to become a member of AMSN or renew your membership at www.amsn.org. You receive lots of cool benefits and perks, such as discounted pricing on the annual convention and continuing education.
We encourage you to help us spread the word and subscribe to the MedSurg Moments podcast via your smartphone podcast app to receive notifications of future episodes. Please be sure to leave us a review and recommend MedSurg Moments wherever you get your podcasts to help us reach even more listeners. I invite you to join the conversation by sharing your ideas and questions on AMSN's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter pages. And don't forget to add hashtag MedSurg Moments to your post. Simply enter AMSN in the search field on any of these social media platforms to connect with us.
The content within the MedSurg Moments podcast represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of the co-hosts and may not necessarily reflect the views, thoughts, and opinions of the Academy of Medical Surgical Nurses. Until next time, I'm Parker.
And this is Laura. And always remember, MedSurg Moments is a moment in our lives, a moment in our MedSurg careers that makes a huge difference.